In a team-based game such as Overwatch, it's very hard to realize when you are making the mistake, and that makes it very hard for players to learn when to switch off their hero. But the important thing to learn is that switching to a new hero sometimes can change the paradigm so much, it allows you to properly counter the enemy team to allow you to get an easy victory. I'm Mr. Pugly, and today I'm going to be teaching you when to switch off the tank hero that you are currently playing. Now, I'm going to probably be making a version of this for DPS and support, so if you're interested in that, click on the top right when those are available. But we're going to start in alphabetical order, so that means we're going to first talk about D.Va. Now, D.Va does really good at diving into the enemy team and dealing lots of damage. Because of this disruptive playstyle, the enemy team can counter you very easily by disrupting you and applying CCs, or even countering your defense matrix so your defense matrix is not useful at all. Because of that, when you're playing D.Va, the heroes you need to watch out for is Zarya, Mei, Roadhog, Sombra, and Reinhardt. Now, Zarya and Mei are obvious choices because they can shoot through your defense matrix, but Roadhog and Sombra can CC you very easily. Roadhog brings you to the enemy team and deals tons of damage once he applies a hook, while Sombra disrupts your plays, doesn't allow you to basically do your tanking abilities, which is defense matrix, and no longer gives you an escape for those brief moments of hacking. And Reinhardt does a fantastic job at killing D.Va once she gets out of her mech, so if she's in her mech and she's about to get out, you can do a well-timed hammer swing, hit her right as she spawns out, and then a second hammer swing brings her down immediately, as well as charge being a very nice tool to counter D.Va. As we go through this list, the general consensus is that the heroes that I mention are good against your hero, but if you feel like you're playing a tank or even a DPS or support and it's just not working out and you feel like it's your fault and you just feel like it's not working out at all, please take a step back and realize perhaps it's the hero that you picked and not necessarily your team. Overwatch players, and generally all competitive players, are very quick to assume that it's your team fault instead of yourself. So be the one to make the switch, and sometimes that will lead you to success. But next, let's move on to Doomfist. Doomfist is a very nice hero that has lots of mobility but doesn't have any vertical range. Because of this, Pharah and Genji can counter him very easily. Genji is able to double jump, which allows him to be out of range for most of Doomfist's abilities because it needs the player to be on the floor, as well as Pharah, where she's high up in the air. Doomfist really can't do a single thing about Pharah. So if the enemy team has a lot of heroes that can get into places where you no longer can, try to consider to switch. And another hero that is really good against countering Doomfist is Junkrat, because the concussive mine can put the distance between the enemy hero and himself very easily, allowing him to harass Doomfist, as well as not having any shields to combat his grenade launcher. And of course, this is kind of a given for all tanks, but Reaper is able to counter you very well because Doomfist thrives on getting up close and personal, and Reaper does fantastic about tanks. His entire role almost is to be a tank buster, so if you're getting up close and personal like Doomfist likes to do, Reaper is basically going to consider you a juice box and just obliterate you. Generally, anyone that can evade CCs and attack at a range is generally a bad matchup for Doomfist. Similarly, Junker Queen has the same problem. If the enemy team consists of heroes that can poke you out of range, usually that is a big sign to switch off of her, or even if you're playing on a map that has a lot of verticality instead of a horizontal flat maps. Because of this, Junker Queen has a big problem against Sojourn, Widow, Pharah, Soldier, Bastion, which is a new hero apparently, Junkrat, and Orisa. Now, Orisa seems like an odd choice, but if you ever play Junker Queen, you'll notice that Orisa gets her javelin spin really quickly, so she can kind of just push you away all the time, which means you can't really do anything because you need to be up close and personal unless you truly master Junker Queen and do really good at mid-range. Anyways, also, Mei does fantastic against Junker Queen. So if you're Mei, you can basically just wall off Junker Queen, kills her whole entire momentum. You can't escape and your entire team can just obliterate her. So if you're playing Junker Queen, you notice any heroes that can kind of just counter you like Orisa and Mei, or just poke you from a distance like all the other heroes I noticed, you probably want to switch off. Now, Orisa is one of the more powerful tanks in the current meta, so she doesn't have a ton of counters, but Zenyatta, Junkrat, and Reaper are really good at killing Orisa. Once again, Reaper and Zenyatta are both tank busters. Their entire job is to kill tanks if you're playing them properly. And Orisa has a huge hitbox as well as a huge head, so you can get hit very easily by Zenyatta's orbs, connect all your pellets with Reaper, or even get easily hit with Junkrat's grenades. Next, we have the classic tank Reinhardt. Now, Reinhardt has this ginormous shield, which makes him very vulnerable to flankers because most of the time you're going to be advancing very slowly while putting up your shield and just focusing on the enemies in front of you. Because of this, flankers are a big problem for Reinhardt, such as Genji and Tracer, but players who can deplete his shield is also a harder problem to deal with Reinhardt, because if you don't have your shield, you're kind of going to get downed really easily. unless you have some good healers. So Bastion and Junkrat can deplete your shield very easily, so you got to keep a watch out for that. As well as Pharah, you can't really do much about her, so you kind of just have to pray that she doesn't play smart and kill you and counter you. And this is to a lesser degree, but if the enemy team has a really good Lucio, this kind of diminished with the knockback resistance that we have in Overwatch 2. But a good Lucio can really mess up all his charges as well as his positioning by pushing him closer to his team. So keep a keen eye out for a tricky Lucio. Now Roadhog is very hard countered by Ana and Zarya. Ana allows you to apply a anti-heal grenade on Roadhog, which means you can no longer heal, as well as Zarya allowing you to apply a barrier on anybody you hook. So if a smart Zarya sees you hook a player, they can barrier the player that you just hooked, basically just diminishing your combo and not allowing you to do anything with it. Mei to a slighter degree because she can ice block very easily when she gets hooked, so she doesn't really feel threatened by you as much, as well as Reaper and Widowmaker. Reaper's obvious, but Widowmaker does a great job against Roadhog because one, you can't really reach Widowmaker, and Widowmaker does really good on heroes that have big heads, and Roadhog has a pretty big head. Sigma is kind of a harder character to counter in my honest opinion, but Sigma kind of has the same problems as Reinhardt, where if you deplete his shield, you can't really do much about it unless you have the kinetic grasp ability. But because of this, Genji, Sombra, and Tracer do great against Sigma because once you place your barrier out forward, it's hard to reposition it. Diva does great at diving into Sigmas, so do Reinhardt's, charge past the shield and deal lots of damage to Sigma, as well as Junkrat and Bastion do a great job at diminishing your shields. But the key characters to really look out for is Reaper, Sombra. Next we move on to Winston. Winston likes to dive into the enemy team and get up close and personal. Because of this, heroes with shotguns do a fantastic job against Winston, such as Roadhog, Reaper, and Junker Queen. Ana does a great job against flankers as well because you can sleep dart them very easily, and Winston's a pretty big target to sleep dart. Junkrat does a fantastic job by placing traps and potentially trapping Winston. And most of the time when you do dive an enemy team, you want to place your bubble, but if you do get trapped, you're a prime target for everybody else that can counter you, as well as Pharah. Granted, you do a better job killing Pharah in Overwatch 2 with Winston, but Pharah is a pretty hard counter because Winston is primarily short-ranged. Now next is Zarya. Zarya is considered one of the best tanks in Overwatch 2 right now, but she does a terrible job against Pharahs. Pharahs cannot get really hit by Zarya at all and can easily punish Zaryas that go too up close to the enemy team, which most Zaryas want to do because you have those two bubbles now. But besides that, Tracer and Sombra and Reaper are great as well because you can make Zaryas panic, and because of the fact that Zarya has no quick burst damage, you really start to panic if you get a flanker on you that deals a ton of damage to you. The game plan that enemy teams should really follow when attacking Zarya is to make you panic so quickly that you waste bubbles. If they can constantly lure out your bubbles, you will drop very quickly, but it's a different story if you're a smart Zarya. Because of the strategy of making Zarya panic and pop her bubbles really quickly, Winston does a fantastic job at that, because when you jump in front of their faces, it's kind of intimidating and constantly getting ticked. It kind of makes you panic and want to activate your bubbles. So Winston is a great choice against Zarya as well. Essentially, if the enemy team is constantly diving you, you're going to have a bad time. Also, it's a little known fact that if the enemy team is targeting the rest of your team, and you can't really protect them and they die, you will crumble next because you have no support. So keep that in mind. If the enemy team is countering you by targeting your team, perhaps try to focus the bubbles on them instead. But either way, if you notice heroes that are constantly diving you and making you panic, perhaps you want to switch off of Zarya or get into a more calm headspace. And finally, we have Wrecking Ball. Now, Wrecking Ball is one of my favorite tanks in the entire game, probably my top 3 all-time favorite characters. Because of this, I feel really strongly on who I can say counters Wrecking Ball because I have a lot of personal experience on this. But because of that, I feel the most qualified to say that Mei, Sombra, Reaper, Roadhog, Ana, and Junkrat are primarily the characters that are going to counter you very easily as Wrecking Ball. The reason why these characters are such a problem for Wrecking Ball is because you want to have a constant momentum to deal lots of damage with Wrecking Ball. But if they prevent your momentum by activating traps, activating CCs, making you sleep dart, or just not allowing you to go into balls such as Sombra, you will crumble pretty quickly. So if you see any characters that has lots of CCs or slowing you to the point where you can't really do your tricks, that's when you should swap off of Wrecking Ball. Now, since we talk about every single tank, let's talk about Reaper. Now, Reaper was kind of a character I mentioned a lot. That's because his whole point is to kill tanks, as I said maybe like 3 times already. So what should you do to counter Reaper? The easiest way to counter Reaper is you need to communicate to your team, or your team realizes by themselves that they need to watch out for Reaper. If you can't personally kill him because he thrives against killing you, it's best to communicate to your team. Perhaps they can swap to someone else to easily handle Reaper. But personally, whenever I see a Reaper on any team, I do the best when I'm playing Zarya, Junker Queen, Roadhog, and Orisa, so perhaps switch to one of those and you'll have a better time. I know that feels a little crummy for me to tell you that you need to communicate to your team, because there's some people that don't like to communicate at all, but it is for the best when playing against a Rebirth that is demolishing you. As a tank, you're a big centerpiece to allowing your team to survive or even disrupt the enemy team so your team can survive longer. So if you're going down, your rest of your team is probably going to crumble. And as always, a big shout out to the members who make these videos possible. We got Clairvoyance, Rick Iglesias, Cameron, and Wishkeeper. These are the people who support me as little as $5 a month on Patreon or YouTube, and you can also support me as little as $5 a month by clicking the link in the comments or the description or on the top right to become a member. The more members we have, the closer I get to becoming full-time, which means more videos for you guys. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye.
And the last shall be first to immerse in a pass out heat, facing him up with a moxie melt till he woke up drowning in tchotchke hell. War in a cave with a torch on the wall, then a window arrangement of porcelain dolls.